You want to know the difference between a fool and a master. The fool announces every move before making it. The master simply moves, and the world shifts around them. I've walked through corridors where the loudest voices echoed off stone walls, demanding attention, begging for validation. I've watched self-proclaimed heroes parade their intentions like peacocks displaying feathers, and I've observed from the shadows how quickly those bright flames extinguish when the wind of consequence blows through. But here's what they never tell you in those grand halls of learning, in those boardrooms of ambition, in those arenas of social performance. True power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It simply is. You see, the world has convinced you that if you're not constantly broadcasting your worth, you're invisible. That if you're not performing competence, you're not competent at all. They've sold you this mythology that silence equals weakness, that restraint equals fear, that keeping your cards close to your chest means you have no hand to play. But I'm here to tell you something that might shatter that illusion entirely. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one commanding attention. It's the one who doesn't need it. The one who's mastered their craft so thoroughly that their work speaks in languages louder than words ever could. The one who understands that real mastery is a quiet, patient, almost invisible force that reshapes reality without fanfare. This is about the alchemy of competence. The potions that brew in silence, the spells that cast themselves, the magic that happens when you stop trying to convince everyone you're powerful and simply become it. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to stop performing and start transforming? Let me take you back to a moment most overlooked. A moment where a boy survived something he shouldn't have, and suddenly the entire wizarding world couldn't stop talking about it. The chosen one, the boy who lived. Every achievement, every scar, every breath he took became a headline, a legend, a story told in whispers and shouts alike. And where was I? In the dungeons, brewing, teaching, protecting, building an empire of knowledge that would one day save that very boy's life. And he'd never even know half of it. You see, the world worships spectacle. It bows to the performer, the showman, the one who turns their life into a stage production. We've built entire civilizations around the idea that visibility equals value. Social media has turned this into a religion. Everyone's broadcasting their morning routines, their productivity hacks, their wins before the ink on the contract is even dry. But here's the trap they don't warn you about. When you're busy announcing your competence, you're not actually building it. When you're performing mastery, you're not deepening it. Every moment spent convincing others of your worth is a moment stolen from actually becoming worthy. The loudest person in the room is often compensating for what they lack in substance. Think about it. The truly skilled surgeon doesn't need to tell you about every successful operation. The master craftsman doesn't photograph every chisel stroke. The brilliant strategist doesn't announce their next move to the opponent. They simply do the work, and the work speaks. I watched colleagues parade their achievements, seeking validation from the headmaster, from the ministry, from anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, I was perfecting spells that could counter dark magic most wizards couldn't even pronounce. I was memorizing antidotes to poisons that hadn't been brewed in centuries. I was becoming indispensable, not by demanding recognition, but by making my absence unthinkable. And this is where most people misunderstand silence. They think it's passive. They think it's hiding. But quiet competence isn't about invisibility. It's about intentionality. It's about choosing where your energy goes. It's about understanding that the garden growing in the dark becomes stronger than the one constantly exposed to every passerby's gaze. The noise, it's a distraction. A beautiful, glittering distraction that keeps you from doing the one thing that actually matters. Mastering your craft in the depths where real transformation happens. Do you know what separates a passable potion from a masterpiece? It's not the ingredients. Any fool can follow a recipe. It's not even the technique, though that matters. No, it's the thousands of hours spent understanding why moonstone powder reacts differently under a waxing moon versus a waning one. It's the muscle memory of stirring counterclockwise exactly 7 times, no more, no less, because you've done it so many times. Your hand knows the rhythm better than your mind does. It's the work nobody sees, and that's the secret they don't want you to know. Mastery isn't built in the spotlight. It's forged in the furnace of repetition, in the solitude of practice, in the unglamorous hours when nobody's watching and nobody's applauding. Think about the greatest achievements in your own life. Were they born in moments of public performance, or were they cultivated in private, late nights, early mornings, the quiet determination when everyone else had gone home? The real magic happened when you stopped caring about the audience and started having a conversation with excellence itself. I spent decades perfecting the art of occlumency, not because I wanted anyone to know I could do it, but because I needed to survive in a world where reading minds was a weapon and protecting yours was armor. Nobody gave me a medal for it. Nobody wrote songs about Severus Snape, master of mental fortitude. But when it mattered, when everything hung in the balance, that invisible skill became the difference between victory and annihilation. This is what quiet competence understands. Value isn't determined by visibility. A diamond doesn't lose its worth because it's buried underground. In fact, the buried diamond is more valuable than the one sitting in a shop window, precisely because it hasn't been compromised, hasn't been handled by 1,000 careless hands, hasn't lost its integrity to the demands of display. Your skills are like that. When you're constantly excavating them for public consumption, you're not giving them time to compress under pressure, to crystallize into something unbreakable. You're trading long-term mastery for short-term validation. And that trade, it's bankrupting your potential. But here's where it gets interesting. When you do finally reveal what you've built in silence, the impact is seismic, because competence that's been cultivated in the dark has a weight to it, a density that can't be faked. People feel it immediately. They might not understand why you command the room without saying a word, why your solutions cut through problems like a blade through butter, why your presence alone shifts the energy. It's because you've done something they haven't. You've fallen in love with the craft itself, not the applause. You've become intimate with excellence in a way that doesn't require witnesses. And that kind of mastery, it doesn't just open doors. It removes the walls entirely. Here's something that will twist your understanding. The moment you need to prove your power is the moment you've already lost it. Real power is assumed, not asserted. It exists in the space between what you could do and what you choose to do. It lives in restraint, in the calculated withholding, in the knowing smile that says, I could end this conversation with a single sentence, but I won't, not yet. I walked among Death Eaters who tortured for sport, who flaunted their cruelty like trophies. And I walked among Order members who wore their righteousness like badges of honor. Both sides so desperate to prove something to themselves, to each other, to history. And there I stood, playing both sides, trusted by neither, essential to both. Why? Because I never needed anyone to believe in my power. I simply wielded it when necessary, and withdrew into shadow when I didn't. That unpredictability, that economy of force, that's what made me dangerous. The world is full of people screaming their credentials at you, dropping names, listing achievements, building monuments to their own importance. And you know what that signals to anyone truly paying attention. Insecurity, a desperate need for external validation because internal certainty is absent. But when you've built something real, when you've actually put in those 10,000 hours in the dark, when you've failed and rebuilt and failed again until failure itself became just another tool in your arsenal, you don't need to announce it. It radiates from you like heat from a fire. People feel it before you even speak. I taught students who thought they knew everything, who waved their wands with theatrical flourish, who spoke their incantations like they were performing Shakespeare. And I taught students who whispered their spells, who moved with precision, who understood that magic, real magic, is about control, not spectacle. Guess which ones actually survived the war. This is the paradox. The less you need to prove, the more you've actually proven. The quieter your competence, the louder its impact. It's inverse mathematics. It's the magic of subtraction in a world obsessed with addition. And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. True competence creates a kind of gravitational field. You don't chase opportunities. They orbit around you. You don't demand respect. It's given reflexively. You don't build a reputation. It builds itself in the minds of everyone who's witnessed what you can do when it matters. But this only works if you've done the work, if you've genuinely become formidable in your domain, because the universe has a way of exposing pretenders. You can fool people for a season with performance and charisma, but when the crisis comes, when the dragon actually shows up at the gates, everyone discovers very quickly who's been training in secret and who's just been rehearsing lines. So, ask yourself, when the moment comes that truly tests you, and it will come, will your competence speak for itself? Or will you still be searching for words to convince everyone you belong in the arena? Let me tell you about a particular kind of torture. It's not the cruciatus curse. It's subtler, more insidious. It's being the only person in the room who knows the answer, who can solve the crisis, who holds the key to survival land, having to remain silent, having to watch others fumble, make mistakes, move in the wrong direction, all while you wait for the precise moment when your intervention will mean something. That's discipline. That's strategy. That's the architecture of silence. Most people confuse silence with absence. They think if you're not speaking, you're not participating. If you're not reacting, you're not engaged. But silence is active. It's a choice. It's a weapon. And like any weapon, it requires mastery to wield effectively. I spent years watching Dumbledore make decisions I disagreed with, strategies that seemed foolish, plans that felt reckless, and I bit my tongue. Not because I lacked the courage to speak, but because I understood something crucial. Timing is everything. A truth spoken too early is just noise. A solution offered before the problem is fully understood is just interference. The competent person knows when to speak. The quietly competent person knows when not to. Think about the people you respect most in your life, the mentors who shaped you, the leaders you'd follow into battle. I'd wager they're not the ones who filled every silence with their own voice. They're the ones who listened more than they spoke, who observed more than they performed, who made every word count, because words weren't cheap currency they threw around carelessly. Silence creates space, and in that space, things happen. People reveal themselves. Problems clarify. Solutions emerge organically. But you have to resist the urge to fill that space with your own anxiety, your own need to be seen and heard and validated. This is where modern culture is failing you spectacularly. You've been conditioned to believe that constant communication equals connection, that perpetual productivity broadcasts equal value, that if you're not in everyone's feed, you're falling behind. But here's the reality. Every hour you spend curating your image is an hour you're not refining your skill. Every moment devoted to managing perceptions is a moment stolen from actual growth. You're building a facade while your foundation crumbles. The architecture of silence is about building that foundation where nobody can see it. It's about constructing something so solid, so unshakable, that when the storms come, and they always come, you're still standing while everything else has been swept away. I learned to move through Hogwarts like a shadow, present but unobtrusive, observing everything, revealing nothing. And in that deliberate obscurity, I accumulated knowledge that became power. I saw patterns others missed. I understood dynamics that escaped those too busy performing to actually perceive. The quietly competent person is always 3 moves ahead, not because they're a genius, but because they're not distracted by the performance. They're playing a different game entirely. While everyone else is competing for attention, they're competing with themselves, with excellence, with the highest version of what they could become. And that competition, it's far more demanding than any audience could ever be. But let's not romanticize this. Let's talk about what they conveniently leave out of every hero's tale, every success story, every motivational speech about quiet excellence. It's lonely, devastatingly so. When you choose the path of silent mastery, when you commit to building something real instead of something visible. You're making a trade most people aren't willing to make. You're trading immediate gratification for delayed fulfillment. You're trading social approval for self-respect. You're trading the comfort of the crowd for the solitude of the summit. And there will be nights, many of them, when you question whether it's worth it. I protected Harry Potter for years. Every decision I made, every risk I took, every piece of myself I sacrificed was for him. And what did I receive in return? Suspicion, hatred, disgust. He looked at me like I was the villain in his story, never knowing I was the reason there was still a story to tell. That's the burden. You'll do your greatest work, make your most significant contributions, achieve your most important victories, and nobody will know. Nobody will thank you. Nobody will write your name in the history books or toast to your success at the feast. And you have to be okay with that. No, you have to be more than okay with it. You have to find fulfillment in the work itself, in the mastery itself, in the knowledge that you did what needed to be done regardless of recognition. Because here's the trap. If you need validation, you'll always be at the mercy of those who give it. You'll twist yourself into shapes that don't fit your soul just to earn their approval. You'll compromise your standards, dilute your vision, soften your edges until you're so palatable, so acceptable, so utterly unremarkable that you've become a ghost of who you could have been. The quietly competent person understands that external validation is fool's gold. It glitters beautifully, but holds no real value. It can be given and taken on a whim, based on trends, moods, politics, whatever narrative happens to be popular in the moment. But internal validation, self-respect earned through genuine excellence, that's the philosopher's stone. That's the transformation that cannot be undone. Once you know what you're capable of, once you've proven it to yourself in the crucible of real challenge, nobody can take that from you. Still, the loneliness persists. You'll watch others celebrate mediocre achievements like they've conquered worlds. You'll see inferior work praised while your masterpiece goes unnoticed. You'll bite your tongue 1,000 times while incompetence gets promoted and excellence gets overlooked. And you'll wonder in your weakest moments if maybe they're right. If maybe the game is rigged and you're the fool for playing it straight. If maybe you should just join the circus, paint your face, and perform with everyone else. But then something happens. A moment arrives when everything you've built in secret becomes suddenly, urgently, undeniably necessary. A crisis emerges that only your unique skill set can resolve. A question is asked that only your accumulated knowledge can answer. And in that moment, the loneliness transforms into something else entirely. Purpose, justification, vindication, not from others, from yourself. Because you realize that every silent hour was preparation for this. Every lonely night was forging you into the exact instrument required for this precise moment. And suddenly, the burden becomes bearable because you understand its weight was always leading somewhere. The question is, can you carry it until you get there? There's a particular kind of magic that happens when quiet competence finally breaks its silence. It's not explosive. It's not dramatic in the way people expect. It's more like watching a master chess player reveal they've had checkmate planned for the last 17 moves. You were watching the entire time, but you had no idea what you were actually witnessing. I'll never forget the moment I gave Harry my memories, when everything I'd hidden, everything I'd endured, everything I'd sacrificed finally came into the light. Not because I wanted glory, not because I needed redemption, but because the truth, at last, had a purpose to serve. And in that moment, silence became voice. Obscurity became clarity. The misunderstood villain became the unsung hero. But here's what's crucial to understand. That revelation only had power because of everything that came before it. If I had been explaining myself all along, justifying every action, seeking approval at every turn, the impact would have been diluted. The truth would have been just another opinion in a sea of noise. This is the culmination that quiet competence builds toward. Not the moment of recognition that's a byproduct, not the goal, but the moment when your preparation meets opportunity with such perfect alignment that the outcome seems inevitable, almost preordained. You've seen this in your own life, haven't you? Those moments when years of unseen work suddenly converge into a single performance that looks effortless. The presentation that stuns the room because you've spent months mastering the material. The solution you offer that cuts through chaos because you've been studying the problem from every angle. The skill you demonstrate that silences skeptics because you've honed it in private until it became second nature. That's not luck. That's not talent. That's the compound interest of competence. Small deposits made consistently in the account nobody else could see, accumulating into wealth that surprises everyone except you. But here's the twist. Even in revelation, the truly competent remain measured. They don't gloat. They don't say, "I told you so." They don't turn their vindication into a victory lap. Because they understand something fundamental, the work never ends. One moment of recognition doesn't define you. The pattern does. The consistency does. The relentless commitment to excellence, regardless of who's watching. I could have spent my final moments explaining everything, defending my choices, making sure Harry understood exactly how noble I'd been, how much I'd sacrificed. But I didn't. I gave him what he needed, the truth, the essential information, and then I let go. Because even in death, I refused to cheapen what I'd built by begging for understanding. Your moments of revelation will come too. Maybe not as dramatically, hopefully not as fatally, but they'll come. The project that finally gets greenlit because you're the only one who can execute it. The opportunity that finds you because your reputation preceded you. The crisis where everyone turns to you because somehow, without ever announcing it, you became the person they knew they could count on. And when those moments arrive, you'll understand why the silence was necessary, why the loneliness was worth it, why every hour spent building instead of broadcasting was an investment that paid dividends beyond what recognition ever could have offered. Because in that moment, you won't be proving yourself. You'll simply be being yourself. And that difference, that's everything. So where does this leave you? Standing at a crossroads, I imagine one path leads back to the comfort of performance, the dopamine hits of validation, the safe harbor of being seen. The other path descends into the dungeons of your own potential, dimly lit, uncertain, demanding everything you have to give. Which do you choose? Because here's what I need you to understand. This isn't a philosophy for everyone. Quiet competence requires a particular kind of courage that most people simply don't possess. It requires you to believe in yourself when nobody else does. It requires you to keep building when there's no evidence it will ever matter. It requires you to find meaning in the work itself, not in what the work might earn you. Most people can't do that. Most people need the applause to keep going. They need the likes, the comments, the reassurance that they're on the right path. And there's no shame in that. It's human. We're social creatures wired for approval. But some of us are different. Some of us hear a different calling. We're the ones who slip away from the feast to practice our craft, who decline invitations because we're in the middle of something that matters more, who endure being misunderstood because being truly known would require explanations we don't have time to give. We're the alchemists, the shadow workers, the silent architects of outcomes that others will attribute to luck or timing or fate, never realizing they were crafted with precision in spaces they never thought to look. And here's the truth they'll never tell you in those motivational seminars. This path doesn't guarantee success, not in the way the world measures it. You might spend your entire life building something magnificent that never receives its moment of recognition. You might master your craft only to watch lesser talents receive greater rewards. You might die with your greatest work unseen, your finest contributions unacknowledged. But you'll die having become something most people never achieve, genuinely excellent, truly masterful, deeply competent in a way that didn't require an audience to validate it. And that mastery, it's an inheritance you leave behind in ways you'll never fully comprehend. The student who learned from watching your discipline, the colleague who absorbed your standards, the person who witnessed your quiet excellence and decided to stop performing and start building. I never had children, never had a family in the traditional sense, but I left something behind, a template for how to endure, how to serve something greater than yourself, how to become indispensable not through charisma, but through sheer, undeniable competence. And now I'm leaving you with the same choice I faced decades ago. Will you be the wizard who announces every spell, or the one who casts in silence and lets the magic speak for itself? Will you chase the spotlight, or will you become the light that others eventually cannot ignore? Will you perform competence, or will you embody it so completely that performance becomes irrelevant? The world will always reward the loud temporarily. It will always celebrate the visible superficially, but it will always eventually need the quietly competent. Because when the real challenges emerge, when the true tests arrive, when everything is actually on the line, that's when people stop looking for the performer and start searching for the master. So go, descend into your dungeons, brew your potions in the dark, perfect your craft while others are perfecting their profiles. Build something so undeniably excellent that your silence becomes more powerful than anyone else's speech. And when they finally discover what you've become, don't explain, don't justify, don't apologize for the years you spent becoming formidable instead of becoming famous. Simply demonstrate, and let them wonder how they never saw you coming. Because the most powerful magic has always been the kind that works in secret until, suddenly, impossibly, everything changes. And nobody can quite explain how, except you.